Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. When Sherrone Moore took over this Michigan program, I think a lot of us Michigan fans were most excited for what this program was going to look like on the recruiting trail under Sherrone Moore. And it, really became evident early in Sherrone Moore's tenure that this program was going to be more aggressive on the recruiting trail. I think as a lot of Michigan fans, we looked at this Michigan team and said, yeah, that's how it should look. You look at Michigan back to back to back Big Ten champions, just coming off a national championship. What are the premier programs, across the country? I think a lot of us Michigan fans were looking at this team and say it should be a little bit more aggressive on the recruiting trail. I think Sherrone Moore agreed with us. He's made a lot of different moves to kind of make Michigan a bigger player on the recruiting trail. And I think that one position that a lot of Michigan fans were kind of just banging the table for in terms of getting a little bit more talent into was the wide receiver spot. And you take a look at what Michigan is doing in this 2025 cycle. They are being extremely aggressive, pushing after multiple of some of the better wide receivers that we see across the country. We want to get into some of my favorite pass catchers that Michigan is going after, turning the heat up on in this 2025 cycle. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, one massive shout out to the Michigan fans. Many of you guys know I'm a massive Michigan fan. I love talking the recruiting trail. The amount of support you guys have continued to show the boys over the last couple of weeks in the middle of June and July, I can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, I would love to hear from you guys in terms of what pass catchers you want to see in this Michigan class in 2025. Let me know in the comment section. We'll chop it up there. I'll give you guys some of my thoughts and opinions as well. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start with, what Michigan has in their 2025 class as we sit. One of the most dynamic tight ends in the country, and Andrew Olish. You have a very intriguing wide receiver from Louisiana and Jacob Washington. You also have kind of that halfback, that H-back, and Eli Owens, who I think is going to be Max Bredesen 2.0 for this Michigan offense. Now, that being said, there's a lot of spots open for Michigan to continue to fill that pass catcher position. And I was kind of looking back and said, when's the last time Michigan landed a top 75 national prospect at the wide receiver spot? We had to go all the way back to 2017 when Michigan landed both Oliver Martin and Donovan Peoples-Jones. You take a look at what Michigan's doing in 2025 in this cycle, multiple top 100 national prospects Michigan has really asserted themselves in this recruitment. And I want to start with five-star wide receiver Drik Meadows from Bishop Gorman. Now, he took an official visit to Michigan. I think a lot of Michigan fans were excited that he was taking the visit, but I don't think there was a lot of optimism with Michigan fans in terms of could we get into that recruitment over the last 24, 48 hours. It seems like Michigan is going to be turning up the heat on Drik Meadows so much that he was supposed to commit today, July 13th. He pushes it back another week. A lot of chatter around that is because Michigan gave him a little bit more to think about. You look at Drik Meadows, at least in my opinion, probably the most talented wide receiver that would come to Michigan since Donovan Peoples-Jones. You start diving into the physical traits, 6'6", 200 pounds, an 80-inch wingspan. That's a state champ in the 300-meter hurdles. These kind of pass catchers on the outside, they don't grow on trees. And this is kind of the ideal wide receiver that we've been looking for Michigan to add at the high school ranks. A big body that can function on the boundary, that can help Michigan attack the deeper third and manufacture some more explosive plays more consistently in the passing attack. And I think Drik Meadows inherently is a really intriguing prospect where you look at the junior season, he only caught 15 passes for 391 yards, 8 touchdowns. So he caught over half of his receptions went for touchdowns. He averaged 26 yards per catch. Kind of a raw wide receiver that hasn't consistently put it together on the football field, but we talk about this all the time when we're talking about high school prospects. You look at the pure physical traits that Drik Meadows brings to the table. Again, 6'6", 200 pounds, a state champ in the 300-meter hurdles in Nevada with an 80-inch wingspan. Those are the type of kids that you want to bet on, get into your program, and then develop up being elite wide receivers. And I think what Michigan can sell Drik Meadows that Alabama or LSU can't sell is early playing time. I mean, Drik Meadows comes to Michigan. He is going to be in the rotation or at least have the opportunity to play early within this Michigan offense as a true freshman and sophomore. We've seen a lot of freshmen and sophomore at the wide receiver position get involved. Last year, you look at Samaj Morgan, freshman getting a lot of touches. Tyler Morse as a sophomore getting heavily involved in the offense. Drik Meadows, that's probably what you're selling to Drik Meadows. At least in my opinion, probably my favorite prospect for Michigan in this 2025 cycle. Now, I still think it's going to be a very contested recruitment. There's a reason a lot of Power 5 programs want Drik Meadows on their team. It's really encouraging to see Michigan just get involved with these kind of guys, because as Michigan fans, we look back at the last 5 years, we just haven't really gotten involved with these elite caliber wide receivers at the high school ranks. You look at this 2025 cycle, there are multiple top 100 national wide receivers that Michigan is going after and seemingly has really good chances at landing. The next player I want to talk about, and a guy that we haven't talked about yet for Michigan because he was committed to Ole Miss, did not take an official visit to Michigan, 5-star wide receiver Jerome Miles from Utah. Michigan going nationally, going to the West Coast, the Midwest, and looking for some top talent. You look at Jerome Miles, it's really easy to sell the Michigan fans on Jerome Miles. I mean, 6'2", 205 pounds, runs a 10.36 in the 100-meter dash. This is one of the fastest players that you see in this 2025 cycle, and you start talking about Jerome Miles, very similar conversation that we talked about with Drik Meadows. With that size and that speed, just go bet on that kid with the physical traits. He might be a little bit more of a raw wide receiver at the high school ranks, but there is some serious upside with Jerome Miles. From what it sounds like, he's going to be at the barbecue for Michigan at the end of July. If you're a Michigan fan, Drik Meadows, Jerome Miles, when's the last time we've been in it for 2 5-star wide receivers, albeit in the same 2025 cycle? It is becoming very evident that Sherrone Moore is going to get very aggressive in terms of going after playmakers at the wide receiver position. Next guy I want to talk about, in my, I think, personal favorite prospect for Michigan, and a guy that it sounds like Michigan has probably the best chance of landing, 4-star wide receiver Andrew Marsh. And Andrew Marsh is a little bit of a different kind of prospect than Jerome Miles and Drik Meadows. Andrew Marsh is about as polished as it comes. Does he have the physical traits and upside that Jerome Miles and Drik Meadows might have? Probably not. But you talk about a wide receiver in the state of Texas that has gone for what? You take a look at the stat line, 65 catches for over 1,100 yards, 15 touchdowns. You turn on the film and say, polished wide receiver that can do a lot of different things at an extremely high level. He's very good after the catch. He can create separation just about as good as any wide receiver that we see in the country, and he's phenomenal at the catch point. This is a guy that if you're asking me who can step in immediately and play year one, it'd probably be Andrew Marsh, because I think he's the best pure football player right now out of these wide receivers that we are going to talk about. And again, it sounds like Michigan is right in it for one of the best wide receivers in the state of Texas in the 2025 cycle. And again, at the very least, if we're Michigan fans, we're just fired up to see Michigan in it for multiple top 100 nationally ranked players at the wide receiver position, because again, it's been since 2017 since we've landed a caliber wide receiver like Andrew Marsh, Jerome Miles, and Drik Meadows. Next two players I want to talk about, guys that are committing today. We might be doing film breakdowns as they commit to Michigan later this afternoon. 4-star wide receiver Taz Williams, another cat from Texas, insane numbers in the 2023 season as a junior, 80 catches for over 1,200 yards. Taz Williams, to me, I would kind of comp him almost to like Deebo Samuel, where he's not necessarily as big as Deebo, but he is built as a running back at the wide receiver spot, a guy that you just want to give him touches and let him operate with the football in his hands. He's a guy that can create separation. He's a guy that can work vertically, but when you turn on the film, he's got such a thick lower half. He deals with contact exceptionally well, makes people miss in space routinely. This is one of those, I wouldn't say gadget guys, but one of those guys that you're just going to get involved in a ton of different ways. You'll probably take some snaps in the backfield. You'll probably give him some end arounds and some screens. One of those guys that Michigan's always looking to create explosive plays on the offensive side of the football. This is a guy that's easy to get involved in your offense because we're just going to get him in a lot of different touches in a lot of different situations. Last kid that we're talking about, sounds like it's between Michigan and Penn State for Taz Williams. Last one we got to talk about committing later tonight, three-star wide receiver, Philip Wright from Louisiana. It sounds like LSU is making a big push for an in-state wide receiver. You look at Philip Wright, another guy that runs a 10.46 and 100-meter dash, and you turn on the film and you can see that speed. And we have that conversation a lot where you sometimes just have track and field athletes that put on shoulder pads and a helmet, and they don't really kind of run that fast on the football field. Philip Wright's a football player with track and field background. Like, this is a guy that when you turn on the film, you see that he's just moving at a little bit of a different clip. He's a guy that can stack wide receivers, elite working vertically down the field. A guy that when safeties and defensive backs take bad angles on, he kind of just runs right by it. So a guy that can operate after the catch, a guy that can work vertically down the field, tracks the ball phenomenally. Another one of those big play wide receivers. And you kind of look at the type of wide receivers that Michigan is going after in this 2025 cycle. Multiple of them have track and field backgrounds. Multiple of these wide receivers excel at creating explosive plays. That is the kind of wide receiver that Michigan is going after in this 2025 cycle, which makes a lot of Michigan fans, at least myself, extremely excited, because one thing that we feel like Michigan can continue kind of take those strides in is hitting explosive plays down the field with their wide receivers. It is an extremely exciting time to be a Michigan fan. We're going to see, hopefully we have some film breakdowns to do later this afternoon. I haven't got no plans on Saturday. We're breaking down Michigan commitments. Really exciting time to be a Michigan fan, and really exciting to see them finally be back trending for multiple top wide receivers in this 2025 cycle. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.